The wagon erupted in flames just as Nathan Zeller crested the ridge, and in the hellish glow he could see a woman clawing desperately at the jammed door while smoke billowed around her like vengeful spirits. His horse, a gray stallion named Dust, needed no urging as Nathan dug his heels in, and they thundered down the rocky slope toward the inferno that had moments ago been a modest covered wagon on the California Trail, just outside Eureka. The year was 1878, and Nathan had seen plenty of hard things in his 26 years, but something about the way that woman fought against her fate made his chest tighten with an urgency he had not felt since the war. He was off Dust before the horse had fully stopped, his boots hitting the dusty ground hard enough to jar his knees. The heat from the flames was already intense, pressing against his face like a physical force, but he wrapped his bandana around his mouth and nose and rushed toward the wagon. The woman was coughing violently now, her movements growing weaker as the smoke overcame her. Nathan could see her hand still working at the door latch, her fingers bloodied from the effort. "Hold on," he shouted, though he doubted she could hear him over the roar of the fire. The canvas top was completely engulfed now, burning fragments floating up into the darkening sky like malevolent fireflies. He grabbed the door with both hands, feeling the hot metal sear his palms even through his leather gloves, and wrenched it with all his strength. The wood had warped from the heat, jamming the mechanism, but desperation gave him power he did not normally possess. With a splintering crack, the door gave way, and he reached inside for the woman. She was barely conscious, her body limp as he pulled her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, or perhaps fear made her weightless. He staggered back from the wagon just as the rear wheel collapsed, sending a shower of sparks into the air. He did not stop moving until they were a safe distance away, where he laid her gently on the grass beside the trail and began checking her for injuries. Her face was smudged with soot. Her dark blonde hair had come loose from its pins and fell in tangled waves around her shoulders. Her dress, which might have been blue once, was torn and blackened. But as she coughed and gasped for air, Nathan felt relief flood through him. She was alive. That was what mattered. He ran back to Dust and grabbed his canteen, then returned to kneel beside her. "Easy now," he said, lifting her head gently and bringing the canteen to her lips. "Small sips. Your throat is raw from the smoke." She drank gratefully, her gray eyes opening to look at him with confusion and fear. When she had drunk enough, she turned her head away and began coughing again, her whole body shaking with the effort. Nathan stayed close, one hand on her shoulder, offering what comfort he could while she fought to clear her lungs. Behind them, the wagon continued to burn, the flames reaching high into the evening sky. Nathan watched it for a moment, knowing that whatever had been inside was lost now. Possessions, memories, perhaps even loved ones. The thought made him look around quickly, scanning the area for any sign of other people, but there was no one. Just the woman and the burning wagon and the empty California landscape stretching out in all directions. "Is there anyone else?" he asked urgently, leaning down so she could hear him. "Was anyone else with you?" She shook her head weakly, then dissolved into another fit of coughing. When she could speak, her voice was hoarse and broken. "Alone. I was alone." Nathan nodded, relieved that at least he did not have to search the wreckage for bodies. He settled back on his heels and watched her carefully, noting the way her breathing gradually became less labored, the way color slowly returned to her ash-covered face. She was young, probably not more than 23 or 24, and pretty beneath the grime and fear. But more than that, there was something in her eyes, a fierce determination that had not been extinguished despite her ordeal. "What happened?" he asked after a few minutes when she seemed strong enough to talk, She closed her eyes, and he saw tears cut clean paths through the soot on her cheeks. I do not know. One moment everything was fine, and the next there was fire everywhere. It spread so fast. The wheel hit a rock, and I heard something break, and then the lantern must have fallen. I could not get the door open. I thought I was going to die in there. Her voice broke on the last words, and Nathan felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. He did not even know her name, but something about her vulnerability and strength combined made him want to shield her from any further harm. "You are safe now," he said firmly. "My name is Nathan Zeller. I have a ranch about 10 miles from here, just outside Irica. You can come there tonight, get cleaned up, rest. We can figure out what to do in the morning." She opened her eyes again and studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. He wondered what she saw when she looked at him. A weathered cowboy with sun-darkened skin and brown hair that needed cutting, wearing dusty clothes and carrying the worn Colt revolver that had been his father's. He was nothing special, just a man trying to make an honest living in a hard land. "I do not even know you," she said finally, but there was no real protest in her voice. She knew as well as he did that she had no other options. "No, you do not," Nathan agreed, "but I just pulled you out of that fire, so I hope that counts for something. Besides, where else are you going to go? It is getting dark, and Irica is still 5 miles off. You are in no condition to walk that far." She looked at the burning wagon, then back at him, and he saw the moment she accepted her situation. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and she nodded. "My name is Laura Jensen, and you are right. I have nowhere else to go." Nathan stood and offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I can try." He led her to Dust, who regarded them both with the patient tolerance of a horse accustomed to unusual circumstances. Nathan mounted first, then reached down and pulled Laura up behind him. She settled against his back, her arms wrapping around his waist, and he tried not to think about how long it had been since he had been this close to a woman. The last year since his mother passed had been lonely, with only his ranch hands for company and the endless work of running a cattle operation to fill his days. They rode in silence as the sun finished setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed to mock the fire they had left behind. Nathan could feel Laura trembling behind him, whether from cold or shock, or both he could not tell. He urged Dust into a faster pace, wanting to get her to the ranch where she could be warm and safe. The Zeller Ranch appeared as the stars began to emerge, a sprawling collection of buildings clustered in a valley with good water and better grazing land. Nathan felt the familiar pride he always experienced when he saw it. This place his father had built from nothing, and that he was now responsible for maintaining. The main house was modest but well constructed, with a wide porch and glass windows that had been his mother's particular pride. The barn and outbuildings were in good repair, and he could see lights in the bunkhouse where his men would be finishing their supper. He rode straight to the main house and dismounted, then helped Laura down. She stood unsteadily on the ground, looking around with dazed eyes. Nathan called out to one of the hands, a young man named Pete who had wandered over from the bunkhouse to see who had arrived. "Take care of Dust for me, would you? Give him extra oats. He earned them tonight." Pete nodded, his curious gaze sliding to Laura before he led the horse away. Nathan knew there would be questions later, but right now his priority was getting Laura inside and tended to. The house was dark and cool, and Nathan lit a few lamps to chase away the shadows. He led Laura to the kitchen and got her seated in one of the chairs at the large wooden table his father had made years ago. Then he stoked the fire in the stove and put water on to boil. "There is a washroom through that door," he said, pointing. I will bring you some clean clothes and hot water. You can clean up and change, and then I will make you something to eat." Laura looked at him with those intense gray eyes. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know anything about me." Nathan paused, considering the question. "Because you need help and I can provide it." "Is there any other reason required?" She did not answer, just continued to watch him with that penetrating gaze that made him feel like she was reading something written on his soul. Finally, she looked away, and he took that as permission to continue with his plans. He found some of his mother's old clothes in the chest where he had carefully packed them after her death. A simple dress in dark green cotton and some undergarments that he tried not to think too much about. They might be a little loose on Laura, as his mother had been a larger woman, but they would do for tonight. He also grabbed a nightgown and a robe, thinking she would want to sleep soon after she had eaten. When he returned to the kitchen, he found Laura standing by the window, looking out at the darkness. She turned when she heard him enter, and he saw that she had been crying again. Her face was tracked with fresh tears, cutting through the soot like rivers through a desert. "I am sorry," she said, her voice thick. "I should not break down like this. You have been nothing but kind, and here I am weeping in your kitchen like a child." Nathan set the clothes on the table and went to her. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hands in his. They were small and cold, the nails broken and bloodied from her desperate attempt to escape the wagon. "You have been through something terrible tonight. You are allowed to cry. Anyone would." She looked down at their joined hands, and he suddenly realized how improper this was, touching a woman he had only just met. But when he tried to pull away, her fingers tightened on his, holding him in place. "The wagon contained everything I owned," she said quietly. "My clothes, my mother's jewelry, the letters from my father before he died. I had some money saved, nearly $200, which was going to help me start fresh in Eureka. I was going to open a dress shop. I am good with a needle, and I thought I could make a living, build a life. But now it is all gone, burned to nothing." Nathan felt his chest tighten at the despair in her voice. "Where were you coming from?" "Sacramento. I worked there for 3 years as a seamstress, saving every penny I could. When my employer died last month, his son sold the business, and I decided it was time to try something of my own. I had heard Eureka was growing, that there were opportunities there for people willing to work. So I bought that wagon and supplies and set out alone." "That was brave," Nathan said, meaning it. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Brave or foolish, and now I have nothing left. No wagon, no supplies, no money, no possessions. Nothing." Nathan looked at this woman, this Laura Jensen, who had traveled alone across California with dreams of building a new life, who had fought so hard to escape that burning wagon, who was trying to hold herself together in the face of devastating loss. And he found himself saying words he had not planned, words that came from some deep place in his chest where his heart kept time with hers. "You have me." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. "What?" "You have me," he repeated, feeling more certain even as his mind told him he was being reckless. "I know I am just a stranger who happened to be riding past at the right moment. But you do not have nothing, Laura. You have me, and I give you my word that I will help you in whatever way I can." For a long moment she just stared at him, and Nathan wondered if he had overstepped, if he had frightened her with the intensity of his promise. But then her face crumpled, and she stepped forward into his arms, burying her face against his chest and sobbing. He held her carefully, one hand on her back and the other cradling her head, and let her cry out all the fear and loss and shock of the day. They stood like that for what felt like a long time, while the water on the stove began to boil and the night deepened outside. Nathan did not mind. He realized with some surprise that this felt right, holding this woman and offering her comfort. It had been so long since he had felt needed by anyone other than his ranch hands, so long since he had held someone close, that he had forgotten how good it could feel. When Laura finally pulled back, her face was red and swollen but calmer. "I am sorry," she said again. "I have gotten your shirt all wet." "It will dry," Nathan said with a small smile. "Come on, let me show you where you can clean up, and then I will make us both something to eat. You must be starving." She nodded, and he led her to the washroom, a small space his father had built onto the house where one could bathe in relative privacy. He brought in the hot water and the clothes, then left her alone to tend to herself. While she washed, Nathan busied himself in the kitchen, grateful to have something to do with his hands. He was not a great cook, but he could manage the basics. He fried up some bacon and eggs, sliced some bread, and put out butter and preserves. Simple fare, but filling and warm. By the time Laura emerged from the washroom, he had plates set on the table and coffee brewing. She looked transformed. The soot was gone from her face and hands, revealing smooth, pale skin and a smattering of freckles across her nose. Her hair was damp and combed back from her face, and his mother's dress fit her better than he had expected, though it was still loose through the shoulders. She looked young and vulnerable and beautiful, and Nathan had to remind himself not to stare. "Feel better?" he asked, pulling out a chair for her. "Much better, thank you." She sat down and looked at the food, and he saw her eyes grow bright with tears again. "You did not have to go to all this trouble." "It is no trouble," Nathan assured her, taking his own seat across from her. "Please eat. You need your strength." They ate in companionable silence, and Nathan was pleased to see her appetite return as she relaxed. She ate every bit of the food on her plate and accepted seconds when he offered them. The color returned to her cheeks, and some of the tension left her shoulders. When they had both finished, he poured them each more coffee, and they sat back in their chairs. "Tell me about your ranch," Laura said, cradling her cup in both hands. "You said it was your family's," Nathan nodded. "My father started it in 1850 when he first came to California looking for gold. He did not find any, at least not in the ground, but he realized there was money to be made selling beef to the miners. So he started buying cattle and building up a herd. By the time I was born in 1852, he had a good operation going. My mother came out from Illinois to be a school teacher and ended up marrying a rancher instead." He smiled at the memory, though it hurt to think about his parents now that they were both gone. "They were good people, fair and honest. They taught me to work hard and treat others with respect. My father died 5 years ago, thrown from a horse. My mother passed last year. Heart gave out in her sleep. The doctor said it was probably for the best, that she did not suffer." Laura reached across the table and put her hand over his. "I am sorry for your loss. It must be hard, running this place alone." "I have good men working for me," Nathan said, "and the work keeps me busy. Too busy to dwell on being lonely most days." "Most days," Laura repeated softly, and he heard the understanding in her voice. She knew about loneliness, he realized. She had left Sacramento alone, traveled across California alone, been planning to start a business alone. They were both solitary people trying to make their way in a hard world. "What about you?" he asked. "You mentioned your father. What about your mother?" Laura's face clouded. "She died when I was 16. Fever took her quick, within 3 days of falling ill. My father never recovered from losing her. He tried to hold things together for my sake, but his heart was broken. He died 2 years later. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I think it was grief. He just did not want to live without her." She paused, looking down at her coffee. "I had an older brother, but he went east before the war and we lost touch. I do not know if he is still alive. So I have been on my own since I was 18. I worked wherever I could, saved what I could, always planning for the day when I would have enough to start my own business. And now that day has come and gone, burned up in a wagon fire on a road outside Irica. The bitterness in her voice cut Nathan deeply. He understood dreams deferred and plans destroyed. He had wanted to travel when he was young, to see the ocean and the big cities, and all the places his father's stories had described. But then his father died and the ranch became his responsibility, and those dreams faded into the realm of things that would never be. "You can still have your dress shop," he found himself saying. "I meant what I said earlier. You have me, and that means you have my help. I have some money saved, not a fortune but enough to get you started. And you are welcome to stay here as long as you need while you get your business established in Irica." Laura looked at him with those penetrating gray eyes, and he could see her mind working, weighing his offer, trying to determine if there were strings attached or ulterior motives. He did not blame her for being cautious. A woman alone had to be careful, especially with men she barely knew. "Why would you do that?" she asked finally. "You do not owe me anything. In fact, I owe you my life. But offering me money and shelter, that is beyond generosity. That is practically sainthood." Nathan laughed at that, a real laugh that felt good after the tension of the evening. "I am no saint, Laura. Ask any of my ranch hands and they will tell you I can be stubborn and demanding and occasionally short-tempered when things do not go as planned. But I was raised to help people when I can, and right now you need help. It is as simple as that." "Nothing is ever as simple as that," Laura said, but there was a hint of a smile on her lips. "But I thank you for the offer. Let me think on it tonight. My head is still spinning from everything that happened, and I cannot make clear decisions when I am this tired." Nathan nodded, recognizing the wisdom in that. "Fair enough. Come on, I will show you to the guest room. You can sleep for as long as you need tomorrow. There is no rush for anything." He led her upstairs to the small bedroom his mother had always kept ready for guests, though they had rarely had any. It was simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but the sheets were clean and the mattress was good. He lit the lamp on the bedside table and stepped back to let her enter. "If you need anything in the night, my room is just down the hall," he said, pointing. "Do not hesitate to call if you have trouble breathing or if you need water or anything else." Laura nodded, standing in the doorway and looking smaller and more vulnerable than ever in his mother's nightgown, which she had changed into while he cleared the dishes. "Thank you, Nathan, for everything. I do not know what would have happened to me if you had not come along when you did." "You do not have to thank me," he said gently. "Just get some rest." He left her then, closing the door softly behind him and walking to his own room at the end of the hall. But sleep did not come easily despite his own exhaustion. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the woman in his guest room and the strange twist of fate that had brought her into his life. He had ridden that particular road 100 times and never encountered anyone in distress. But tonight, he had been there at exactly the right moment to save her life. It felt like providence, like the universe had arranged their meeting for reasons he could not yet understand. He thought about the way she had felt in his arms, both when he pulled her from the fire and when she had cried against his chest in the kitchen. He thought about the determination he had seen in her eyes even through her tears and despair. She was strong, this Laura Jensen. She would recover from this setback and build the life she dreamed of. He was certain of it, and he wanted to help her do it. Not just because it was the right thing to do, but because something about her called to him in a way he had not experienced before. In the few hours he had known her, she had awakened something in him that he had thought died with his parents. A desire for connection, for companionship, for someone to share the burdens and joys of life with. It was too soon to call it love. He was not fool enough to believe in love at first sight. But it was something, some spark of possibility that made him feel alive in a way he had not felt in a very long time. And that was worth nurturing, worth protecting, worth seeing where it might lead. He finally fell asleep with those thoughts tumbling through his mind, and he slept more soundly than he had in months. When Nathan woke the next morning, the sun was already well up, which was unusual for him. He normally rose before dawn to start the day's work. But he had slept deeply, his body taking the rest it needed after the stress and exertion of the previous evening. He dressed quickly and went downstairs, moving quietly so as not to wake Laura if she was still sleeping. But when he reached the kitchen, he found her already up and busy. She had restarted the fire in the stove and was frying bacon, and there was fresh coffee brewing that smelled like heaven. She turned when she heard his footsteps, and he saw that she had pinned her hair back and looked much refreshed from the night's sleep. "Good morning," she said with a small smile. "I hope you do not mind me making myself at home in your kitchen. I woke early and could not get back to sleep, and I thought the least I could do was make you breakfast after all you have done for me." "I do not mind at all," Nathan said, taking his usual seat at the table. "In fact, it is nice to have someone else do the cooking for once. I am adequate but not inspired." She laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Well, I am a decent cook. I had to learn when my mother died, and it was just my father and me. He could not boil water without burning it, so it fell to me to keep us fed." They talked easily while she finished cooking and brought the plates to the table. Nathan found himself relaxing in her company, enjoying the simple domestic scene. It had been so long since he had shared breakfast with anyone except his ranch hands in the bunkhouse, and never with a woman who moved around his kitchen with such comfortable grace. "I have been thinking about your offer," Laura said as they ate, "and I want to accept it, but with conditions." Nathan raised his eyebrows. "Conditions?" "Yes, I will not take your charity, Nathan. If you loan me money to start my business, I will pay back every penny with interest. And while I am staying here, I will earn my keep by cooking and cleaning and whatever other household tasks you need done. I will not be a burden to you." Nathan could see the fierce pride in her eyes and knew better than to argue. This was important to her, maintaining her independence and dignity even while accepting help. He respected that. "Agreed," he said simply. "Though I want it on record that I do not consider you a burden, and I would have been happy to help without conditions." She smiled at him, and it was a real smile this time, reaching her eyes and transforming her face. "I know, and that makes you a rare kind of man, Nathan Zeller, but I need to do this my way. I need to feel like I am building my life through my own efforts, not just relying on the kindness of others." "I understand," Nathan said, and he did. He felt the same way about his ranch. He had inherited it from his father, but he had worked hard to make it his own, to improve and expand it through his own labor and decisions. Pride in one's accomplishments was not something to be dismissed lightly. They finished breakfast, and Nathan went out to check on his men and the day's work. He found them repairing fence lines in the south pasture, honest labor under the hot California sun. He worked alongside them for several hours, enjoying the physical exertion and the simple satisfaction of seeing a job well done. But his mind kept drifting back to the house and the woman inside it, and he found himself making excuses to return earlier than he normally would have. When he came back to the house at midday, he found it transformed. Laura had been busy while he worked. The windows sparkled with fresh cleaning, the floors had been swept and mopped, and there was a stew bubbling on the stove that made his mouth water. Laura herself was in the parlor, dusting the furniture with intense concentration. She looked up when he entered and smiled. "I hope you do not mind." I needed to keep busy, and your house needed some attention." Nathan looked around at the clean, orderly rooms and felt a warmth spread through his chest. His mother would have approved. "I do not mind at all. It looks better than it has in months. Thank you." Over the next few weeks, a comfortable routine developed. Nathan worked the ranch during the day while Laura managed the house with impressive efficiency. She cooked meals that were far better than anything he had made for himself. She kept everything clean and organized, and she even started mending the torn and worn clothing he had been meaning to deal with for months. In the evenings, they would eat dinner together and talk, sharing stories about their lives and slowly learning each other's histories and dreams. Nathan found himself looking forward to those evening conversations more than anything else in his day. Laura was intelligent and thoughtful, with strong opinions about everything from politics to literature to the best way to make bread. She made him laugh with her dry observations about human nature, and she listened intently when he talked about the challenges of running a ranch in changing times. He felt understood by her in a way he had not felt understood by anyone since his mother died, and more than that, he found himself falling for her. It happened gradually, like the slow turn of seasons, but it was inevitable. The way she hummed while she worked, the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating on sewing, the way she looked in the morning light when she did not know he was watching her. All of it combined to create a picture of a woman he wanted in his life permanently. But he held back from saying anything, unsure of how she felt and not wanting to pressure her when she was living in his house and dependent on his help. He had made a promise to help her, and he did not want her to feel obligated to return his feelings out of gratitude. So he kept his growing love locked inside and tried to be content with her friendship and company. Laura, for her part, seemed to blossom in the stability and security of the ranch. The shadows left her eyes, her smile came more readily, and she moved with confidence and purpose. She talked often about her plans for the dress shop, sketching designs and calculating costs. Nathan had offered her the loan money several times, but she kept putting off taking it, saying she wanted to be absolutely certain of her plans before she committed. He suspected she was as reluctant to leave the ranch as he was to have her go. They had created something together in these weeks, a partnership and connection that felt rare and valuable. But he did not want to assume, did not want to read too much into the way she looked at him sometimes, or the way she found excuses to touch his hand or shoulder in passing. Then, nearly a month after he had pulled her from the burning wagon, everything changed. It was a Sunday, and Nathan had given his ranch hands the day off. He and Laura had the house and the land to themselves, and they decided to take advantage of the beautiful spring weather by riding out to the creek that ran through the northern edge of his property. Nathan saddled Dust and a gentle mare named Clover for Laura, and they packed a lunch and set off. The ride was pleasant, through meadows thick with wildflowers and groves of oak trees that provided welcome shade. Laura proved to be a competent rider, handling Clover with easy confidence. They talked and laughed as they rode, and Nathan felt happiness bubble up in his chest like a spring. When they reached the creek, they dismounted and settled on the grassy bank to eat their lunch. The water burbled over rocks, creating a soothing melody, and birds sang in the trees overhead. It was peaceful and beautiful, the kind of moment that etched itself into memory. "I love it here," Laura said softly, looking out at the water. "I can see why you never want to leave." "It is a good place," Nathan agreed. "I have been fortunate." Not everyone gets to build a life in a place they love. She turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "You have built more than a place, Nathan. You have built a home, and you have shared it with me when you did not have to. I cannot tell you how much that has meant to me." "You do not have to thank me," Nathan started to say, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Please, let me finish. I need to say this." She took a deep breath, and he saw her gathering her courage. "When you pulled me from that wagon, I truly believed I had nothing left. Everything I had worked for, everything I had planned was gone. I was ready to give up, to just lie down and let the world defeat me. But then you said those words. You said I had you. And you have kept that promise every day since." She moved closer to him, and Nathan's heart began to beat faster. "You have given me a place to heal and recover. You have given me time to find myself again. You have asked for nothing in return except my company, which I have been happy to give. But more than that, you have made me feel valued and cared for in a way I have not felt since my parents died. And I need you to know that I have feelings for you, Nathan. Strong feelings that go beyond gratitude or friendship." Nathan stared at her, barely able to believe what he was hearing. "Let me finish," she said again, and he fell silent. "I know I am living in your house and depending on your generosity, and I know that complicates things. If you do not feel the same way, I will understand. I will take the loan money you have offered and move to town and start my business, and we will remain friends and nothing more. But I could not let another day pass without being honest about my feelings. You deserve that honesty after everything you have done for me." She stopped talking and looked at him with those clear gray eyes, vulnerable and brave and beautiful, and Nathan felt something break open inside him. All the feelings he had been holding back, all the love he had been afraid to name, came flooding out. "Laura," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I have been in love with you for weeks now. I have been afraid to say anything because I did not want you to feel pressured or obligated. But the truth is, you have become the most important person in my world. When I ride out in the morning, I am thinking about coming back to you. When I eat dinner, I am watching the way the lamplight catches in your hair. When I lie in bed at night, I am imagining what it would be like to have you beside me always." He reached out and took her hands in his, and they were warm and steady. "I do not want you to move to town. I do not want you to open a dress shop unless it is truly what you want, and even then I want you to come home to me at the end of each day. I want to marry you, Laura Jensen. I want to build a life with you here on this ranch. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want everything with you." Tears were streaming down Laura's face, but she was smiling, and it was the most beautiful thing Nathan had ever seen. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it. I want that too. I want you, Nathan. I want this life. I want everything we can build together." And then she was in his arms, and he was kissing her for the first time, and the world narrowed down to just the two of them beside the creek in the spring sunshine. She tasted like hope and home, and Nathan knew with absolute certainty that this was right, that this was the moment his whole life had been leading toward. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Laura laughed with pure joy. "I cannot believe this is happening. A month ago I had nothing, and now I have everything." "You always had everything," Nathan said, touching her cheek gently. "You just needed time to see it. You are strong and capable and remarkable, Laura. You would have been fine even without me. But I am very glad you do not have to be without me." "So am I," she said, and kissed him again. They stayed by the creek for hours, talking about their future and making plans. Laura still wanted to pursue her interest in sewing, but she thought she could do it from the ranch, taking orders from women in town and the surrounding ranches. Nathan thought that was a fine idea and offered to build her a proper workroom in one of the outbuildings. They talked about how quickly they should marry and where the ceremony should be held and who they should invite. "I do not need anything fancy," Laura said. "Just a simple ceremony with a few witnesses. I do not have any family left, and I do not know many people in Erica yet." But I do not care about any of that. I just want to be your wife." "Then you shall be," Nathan promised. "We can speak to the minister in town this week and arrange it as soon as he is able. I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." "Neither do I," Laura agreed, and the look in her eyes made Nathan's heart race. They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, their hands linked between their horses. Nathan felt like he was floating, like his heart was too big for his chest. After so much loneliness, so many years of just existing rather than truly living, he had found someone to share his life with. Someone who understood him and valued him and wanted the same simple, meaningful things he wanted. When they reached the ranch, Nathan lifted Laura down from Clover and pulled her into his arms. "I love you," he said, needing to say the words again, needing her to hear them and know they were true. "I love you too," she replied, and then she kissed him with a passion that left them both shaking. They told the ranch hands that evening, gathering everyone in the bunkhouse to share the news. The men were happy for them, clapping Nathan on the back and congratulating Laura warmly. Pete, the young ranch hand who had taken care of Dust the night Nathan brought Laura home, grinned widely and said he had known they would end up together from the very first moment. "You could just tell," he said with the wisdom of his 20 years. "The way you looked at her, boss. Like she was the answer to a question you did not even know you were asking." Nathan laughed and had to admit the kid might be right about that. The next week passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. They rode into Irica and spoke with Reverend Matthews at the small church there. He was a kind man in his 50s who had known Nathan's parents and was delighted to perform the ceremony. They settled on the following Saturday, giving them just over a week to prepare. Laura used the time to alter one of Nathan's mother's dresses to fit her properly, choosing a soft gray silk that complemented her eyes. She also baked bread and pies for the small reception they planned to hold at the ranch after the ceremony. Nathan arranged for a few neighbors to attend, people who had been friends of his parents and who he thought would be happy to celebrate with them. He also went to his father's old desk and retrieved the wedding ring that had belonged to his grandmother. It was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing fancy but precious for its history. His father had given it to his mother on their wedding day, and she had worn it until the day she died. Now it would belong to Laura, carrying forward the legacy of love and commitment that had always defined the Zeller family. The weeks seemed to drag and fly at the same time. Nathan found himself constantly aware of Laura's presence, drawn to her like a magnet. They stole kisses in the kitchen and held hands on the porch in the evenings, and Nathan felt like a young man again, full of excitement and possibility. Laura glowed with happiness, her face always lit with smiles, and she hummed constantly as she worked. Finally, Saturday arrived. Nathan woke early, too excited to sleep, and found Laura already up as well. They shared breakfast in a comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about the day ahead. Then Nathan went to wash and dress in his best suit, the dark wool one he normally reserved for funerals and formal occasions. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the happy, hopeful man staring back at him. Laura emerged from her room wearing the gray silk dress, and Nathan's breath caught at the sight of her. She had pinned her hair up in soft curls, with a few tendrils framing her face. She held a small bouquet of wildflowers that she must have picked that morning, and she looked so beautiful that Nathan had to blink back tears. "You are stunning," he said, his voice rough. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied with a smile that made his heart skip. They rode into town together in the wagon, sitting close on the bench seat. Nathan could feel the nervous excitement radiating from Laura, matching his own. When they reached the church, they found a small group waiting for them. Reverend Matthews, of course, and the neighbors Nathan had invited. Pete and the other ranch hands had also come, dressed in their best and grinning at the sight of their boss getting married. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Nathan and Laura stood before the Reverend and spoke their vows, promising to love and honor each other all the days of their lives. When Nathan slipped his grandmother's ring onto Laura's finger, he saw tears glisten in her eyes, and he had to swallow hard against his own emotion. And when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife and told him he could kiss his bride, Nathan did so with all the love in his heart, while their small audience applauded and cheered. The reception at the ranch was a joyful affair. The ranch hands had decorated the yard with lanterns and bunting, and long tables were set up with all the food Laura had prepared. There was music and dancing and laughter, and Nathan felt surrounded by community in a way he had not experienced since before his parents died. Laura fit perfectly into it all, moving through the guests with grace and warmth, making everyone feel welcome and valued. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the ranch, Nathan found Laura standing by the paddock fence, watching the horses. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning into him. "A month and a half ago, I was alone and terrified, trapped in a burning wagon with my whole life going up in flames. And now I am standing here as your wife in this beautiful place, surrounded by good people. It feels like a dream." "It is real," Nathan assured her, kissing the top of her head. "This is your life now, our life, and it is only going to get better from here." She turned in his arms to face him, and the love in her eyes took his breath away. "I believe you, and I am so grateful, Nathan." "Grateful to you, grateful for that twist of fate that brought you down that road at exactly the right moment, grateful for every moment since. You saved my life in more ways than one." "You saved mine too," Nathan said honestly. "I did not realize how lonely I was until you came and filled that emptiness. You gave me hope and purpose and love when I had resigned myself to a life without those things. So we saved each other, Laura. And now we get to spend the rest of our lives being grateful for that." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, and Nathan knew that this moment, this feeling, would stay with him forever. This was what happiness felt like. This was what home meant, and he had it all, right here in his arms. The guests began to leave as full darkness fell, calling out their congratulations and well wishes. Pete was the last to go, pausing to shake Nathan's hand and give Laura a respectful nod. "You two are good together," he said simply. "I am real happy for you both." When everyone was gone, Nathan and Laura went into the house, closing the door on the world and entering their first night as husband and wife. Nathan led her upstairs to his bedroom, which was now theirs, and they came together with a tenderness and passion that felt like a perfect blending of their souls. Laura was everything Nathan had imagined and more, generous and responsive and utterly beautiful in her vulnerability and trust. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Laura's head resting on Nathan's chest and his arms wrapped securely around her. He could hear her breathing gradually slow as sleep claimed her, but he stayed awake a while longer, savoring the feeling of her beside him and marveling at how completely his life had changed in such a short time. He thought about that moment when he had first seen the burning wagon, when he had made the split-second decision to ride toward it rather than away. Such a small choice, really, but it had led to this, to love and partnership and a future full of promise. It made him believe in fate, in the idea that some things were simply meant to be. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness, though he was not entirely sure who he was thanking. God, perhaps, or the universe, or just the random chance that had brought them together. It did not really matter. What mattered was that Laura was here. She was his, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted choosing him. The months that followed their wedding were among the happiest of Nathan's life. Laura settled completely into her role as his wife and partner, managing the household with impressive skill while also beginning to take sewing commissions from women in the area. Word spread quickly about her talent with a needle, and soon she had more work than she could handle. Nathan built her the workroom he had promised, a bright space in one of the outbuildings with large windows to let in plenty of natural light. Laura filled it with fabric and thread and all the tools of her trade, and she spent hours there, each day creating beautiful dresses and alterations for her growing list of clients. Nathan loved to watch her work, loved the expression of intense concentration on her face, and the way her fingers moved with such precision and grace. The ranch prospered too. The cattle herd grew, the land produced good grass, and Nathan was able to hire 2 more hands to help with the expanding operation. He and Laura fell into comfortable rhythms, working during the day and coming together in the evenings to share meals and conversation and affection. They learned each other's habits and preferences, the small domestic details that made up a shared life. Laura discovered that Nathan was grumpy before his morning coffee and overly optimistic about the amount of work he could accomplish in a single day. Nathan learned that Laura was ticklish on her ribs and that she sang when she thought no one was listening, old folk songs her mother had taught her. They had their first argument about 3 months in, a silly dispute about whether to plant a vegetable garden or use that space for additional pasture. They both got heated and said things they did not mean, but then they apologized and made up and learned that disagreements did not mean the end of love. As autumn approached, Laura began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first she attributed it to something she ate, but when it continued for several weeks, she began to suspect the truth. When she missed her monthly courses, she knew for certain. She was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after dinner as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. She was nervous, unsure how he would react, but she need not have worried. Nathan's face lit up with pure joy, and he pulled her into his arms with a whoop of excitement that made her laugh. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby. Laura, this is incredible. This is everything I could have wanted. You are happy then?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan assured her, kissing her soundly. "I am over the moon. I am thrilled. I am the luckiest man in California." They spent the rest of the evening talking about names and plans, arguing good-naturedly about whether the baby would be a boy or a girl and whose eyes it would have. Laura felt her nervousness melt away in the warmth of Nathan's enthusiasm, and she felt certain that he would be a wonderful father. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Laura continued to work in her sewing room until her growing belly made it difficult to lean over the table, and even then, she took on smaller projects she could do while sitting comfortably. Nathan was attentive and protective, constantly asking if she needed anything and refusing to let her lift anything heavy. It drove Laura a bit mad at times, but she appreciated his care and concern. As winter set in, Laura's belly grew large, and they prepared the small room next to theirs to serve as a nursery. Nathan built a cradle from sturdy oak, sanding it until it was perfectly smooth and safe. Laura sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how something so small could inspire such powerful love. The baby came on a cold February morning in 1879. After a long and difficult labor that left Laura exhausted but triumphant. Nathan had ridden to fetch the midwife from town, and he paced the hallway outside the bedroom for hours while Laura labored, feeling helpless and terrified. But when he finally heard the sharp cry of a newborn, relief flooded through him so powerfully that his knees buckled. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Green, opened the door and beckoned him in with a smile. "Come meet your son," she said. Nathan entered the room on shaking legs and found Laura propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale but glowing with happiness. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket, and when Nathan approached and looked down at the baby's face, his heart expanded in a way he had not known was possible. His son. His and Laura's son. The baby had a red, wrinkled face and a surprising amount of dark hair, and his tiny fists were waving in the air as he let out another indignant cry. Nathan reached out tentatively and touched one of those small fists, feeling the baby's fingers wrap around his thumb with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Nathan said, his voice choked with emotion. "Laura, he is absolutely perfect." "I think so too," Laura agreed, looking down at their son with such love that it made Nathan's chest ache. "Would you like to hold him?" Nathan nodded, not trusting his voice, and Laura carefully transferred the baby into his arms. Nathan cradled his son against his chest, supporting the tiny head with one hand, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. This was his child, his responsibility, his legacy. He would do everything in his power to protect this small life and give him the best future possible. "What should we name him?" Laura asked softly. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking down at his son's face, Nathan knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," he said. "After my father, Thomas James Zeller." Laura smiled, her eyes bright with tears. "Thomas, I like that. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little one." The first few months of Thomas's life were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. He was a fussy baby, quick to cry and slow to sleep, and Nathan and Laura took turns walking him around the house at all hours of the night. But he was also curious and alert, his dark eyes tracking movement and his expressions constantly changing. Nathan fell completely in love with his son, marveling at every small development and change. Laura proved to be a natural mother, patient and nurturing even when she was clearly exhausted. Nathan tried to help as much as he could, taking over the household chores when Laura was feeding the baby and handling the nighttime wake-ups so she could rest. They were a team, working together to care for this new life they had created, and their bond only grew stronger through the challenges. As spring arrived and Thomas began to settle into more predictable patterns, life on the ranch found a new normal. Laura gradually returned to taking sewing commissions, working while Thomas napped or played on a blanket beside her. Nathan continued to run the ranch, though he found himself coming back to the house more often, drawn by the desire to see his wife and son and be part of their daily life. Thomas grew quickly, reaching milestones that filled Nathan with pride. His first smile, his first laugh, the way he began to recognize his parents and reach for them. By his first birthday, he was walking unsteadily around the house, babbling constantly in a language only he understood, and getting into everything he could reach. Nathan and Laura celebrated with a small party, inviting the ranch hands and a few neighbors to mark the occasion. As they cut the cake Laura had made, Nathan looked around at the gathered people and felt profound gratitude. A little over 2 years ago, he had been alone in this house, going through the motions of life without real joy or connection. Now he had a wife he loved deeply, a healthy son who brought him endless delight, and a home filled with warmth and laughter. He had never imagined such happiness was possible. That night, after the guests had left and Thomas was asleep in his cradle, Nathan and Laura lay in bed together, talking quietly about the day. "I was thinking," Laura said, tracing patterns on Nathan's chest with her fingertips, "about that night when you pulled me from the wagon. Do you remember what I said? You said you had nothing left," Nathan replied, remembering the despair in her voice that night. "And you said I had you," Laura continued. "At the time, I could not really understand what that meant. I was too lost in my grief and fear to see past the immediate loss. But now I understand. Having you meant having everything. A home, a family, a future, love. You were not just offering me shelter or help. You were offering me a whole new life." Nathan pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "I think we offered each other a new life. You gave me purpose and joy when I had resigned myself to lonely existence. You made this house a home again. You gave me Thomas. I am the one who benefited from that night, Laura. You were my salvation as much as I was yours." "Then we saved each other," Laura said softly, echoing the words Nathan had spoken on their wedding day. "And we built something beautiful from that moment of crisis." "We did," Nathan agreed, "and we will keep building it for the rest of our lives." The years passed with the comfortable rhythm of a well-lived life. Thomas grew from a toddler to a young boy, full of energy and curiosity. He followed Nathan around the ranch, asking endless questions about the cattle and horses and land, and Nathan patiently taught him everything he knew. Laura continued her sewing business, her reputation growing until women traveled from surrounding counties to commission work from her. And Nathan's ranch expanded and prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the area. When Thomas was 4, Laura discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident in her ability to handle pregnancy and motherhood. The labor was easier the second time, and in the spring of 1883 they welcomed a daughter. They named her Grace Catherine after both their mothers, and she was a sunny, easy baby who seemed to smile from the moment she was born. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her and show her things. Nathan watched his children interact and felt his heart swell with pride and love. This was what life was meant to be. This connection, this family, this sense of purpose and belonging. 2 years later, another son arrived whom they named William Robert. And 3 years after that, a second daughter they called Margaret Ann. Their family grew, their house filled with noise and laughter and the organized chaos of raising children. Nathan hired more ranch hands to help with the work, so he could spend more time with his growing family. Laura eventually had to stop taking as many sewing commissions, focusing instead on her children and household, though she still made special pieces for friends and family. The children grew up strong and healthy, shaped by the values Nathan and Laura worked hard to instill. Honesty, hard work, kindness, respect for others. They went to school in Eureka, riding in each morning with Nathan or one of the hands and returning in the afternoon with stories about their day. Evenings were spent around the dinner table, talking and laughing and being together as a family. Nathan taught Thomas the business of ranching, taking him on cattle drives and showing him how to manage the land and animals. Laura taught Grace her skills with a needle, and Grace proved to have inherited her mother's talent. William was fascinated by horses and spent hours in the stable, learning to train and care for them. Margaret, the baby, was still finding her interests, but she showed signs of being mechanically inclined, always taking things apart to see how they worked. Through it all, Nathan and Laura's love for each other remained strong and steady. They still had their disagreements, as any couple married for years would, but they had learned how to communicate and compromise. They made time for each other, even amid the demands of ranch and children, stealing moments alone when they could. And every anniversary, Nathan would take Laura back to the creek where they had first confessed their love, and they would remember that day and renew their commitment to each other. As the children grew older and more independent, Nathan and Laura found themselves with more time together again. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the ranch, talking about their days and their dreams and the grandchildren they hoped to someday have. They felt content, satisfied with the life they had built together from that moment of crisis so many years ago. Thomas, now 18, had become a capable young man who loved the ranch as much as Nathan did. It was clear he would stay and eventually take over the operation, carrying on the family legacy. Grace, at 14, was already taking paid commissions for her sewing, showing the same fierce independence her mother had displayed. William, at 12, was working with a horse trainer in town, learning advanced techniques. And Margaret, at 9, was the family comedian, always making them laugh with her observations and antics. One evening, as Nathan and Laura sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard, Laura leaned against Nathan's shoulder with a contented sigh. "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" she asked. "If you had ridden down a different road that night, or if you had been 5 minutes earlier or later." Nathan wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. "Sometimes. But mostly I just feel grateful that things happened exactly as they did. Every choice, every moment led us here. And here is exactly where I want to be." "Me too," Laura said softly. "Though I do not like to think about how close I came to dying that night, if you had not come along when you did." "But I did," Nathan interrupted gently. "I was there at exactly the right moment and I pulled you out. And then we built this beautiful life together. That is what matters. Not the what-ifs, but the what-is." Laura nodded and kissed him, a soft press of lips that held all the love and trust of their years together. "You are right, as usual, and what is pretty wonderful." They sat together as the light faded and the stars began to emerge, surrounded by the sounds of their children's laughter and the peaceful night noises of the ranch. Nathan felt a deep sense of peace and completion. This was his life's work, not just the ranch but this family, this love, this legacy of connection and commitment. He had started with nothing but land and loneliness, and Laura had started with nothing but determination and dreams. Together, they had created something that would outlast them both. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges and joys. Thomas married a local girl named Sarah, and they had 3 children, giving Nathan and Laura their first grandchildren. Grace opened her own dress shop in Eureka, finally fulfilling the dream Laura had once had for herself. William started a horse breeding program on a portion of the ranch land Nathan deeded to him. And Margaret, surprising everyone, went to San Francisco to study engineering, one of the few women in her program. Nathan and Laura grew older together, their hair turning gray and their bodies showing the wear of hard-working lives. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with each passing year, seasoned by shared experiences and weathered challenges. They had built something that lasted, something real and true and valuable. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Laura to the creek again, as had become their tradition. They were both in their 50s now, moving more slowly than they once had, but the place still held its magic. They sat on the same spot where Nathan had proposed, where they had first spoken of building a life together, and looked back on all they had accomplished. 30 years, Laura marveled, shaking her head. "Sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday that you pulled me from that wagon, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." "It was a lifetime ago," Nathan said with a smile. "A whole lifetime that we have lived together, and I would not change a single moment of it. not even the hard parts. The year of the drought, when Thomas broke his arm, when we lost that big cattle contract, not even those, Nathan confirmed. The hard parts made us stronger. They taught us to rely on each other and to appreciate the good times. Every challenge we faced together, and that made all the difference. Laura leaned her head on his shoulder and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the creek burble and the birds sing. Finally, Laura spoke again, her voice soft with memory. "Do you remember what I said that night, when you told me I had you?" Nathan thought back to that moment, etched so clearly in his memory despite the passage of time. "You did not say anything at first, you just cried." "I cried because I could not believe someone would offer me that kind of unconditional support. I had been alone for so long, responsible only for myself, fighting for every scrap of security. And then there you were, this stranger who had just saved my life, offering me not just help but himself. It was overwhelming." She lifted her head to look at him, and Nathan saw tears glisten in her eyes. "But you were right, Nathan. I did have you, and having you meant having everything I could ever need or want. You have been my partner, my protector, my best friend, my love. You have given me a home and a family and a purpose. You have made me happier than I ever imagined possible, and I need you to know that I am grateful for every single day we have had together." Nathan felt his own eyes grow damp. "I am grateful too, Laura. You took a lonely cowboy and showed him what it meant to really live. You filled my empty house with love and laughter. You gave me children and grandchildren, a legacy that will continue long after we are gone. But more than any of that, you saw me. The real me, beneath the ranch owner and the hard worker and all the roles I played. You saw who I was and loved me anyway. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They kissed, a gentle meeting of lips that held 30 years of love and commitment and shared history. And then they sat together by the creek until the sun began to set, holding hands and remembering and feeling blessed by the life they had built from the ashes of a burning wagon. As they rode back to the ranch that evening, the house came into view, lit from within by lamplight and alive with the sounds of family. Thomas and Sarah were there for dinner, along with the grandchildren. Grace had come from town to join them. William and Margaret had both come home for the anniversary celebration. The whole family gathered together to honor the love that had created them all. Nathan and Laura dismounted and stood for a moment, looking at their home and the people visible through the windows. "We did good," Nathan said simply. "We did," Laura agreed. "We did very good indeed." They walked into the house hand in hand, ready to celebrate with their family and continue building the beautiful life they had started 30 years ago when a cowboy saved a woman from a burning wagon and offered her not just rescue but everything. They had taken that moment of crisis and transformed it into decades of love, creating something that would endure for generations. And as Nathan looked around at his wife, his children, his grandchildren, all gathered in the home he and Laura had made together, he knew with absolute certainty that he would not change a single thing about the journey that had brought them here. The evening was filled with good food and better company. The grandchildren ran around the house with the endless energy of youth, while the adults talked and laughed and shared stories. Nathan and Laura sat at the head of the table, watching it all with contentment and pride. This was their legacy, built from love and hard work and the simple decision to say yes to each other all those years ago. As the night grew late and the family began to depart, each member came to embrace Nathan and Laura and wish them congratulations on their anniversary. The grandchildren gave them drawings and handmade cards. Grace presented them with a beautiful embroidered wall hanging depicting the ranch. Thomas gave a moving speech about how his parents' love had shaped him into the man and father he had become. When everyone had finally gone, leaving just Nathan and Laura alone in the quiet house, they climbed the stairs to their bedroom, their footsteps slow but steady. They prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage and then settled under the covers together, Laura curling into Nathan's side as she had done for 30 years. "Thank you," Laura whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Nathan asked, though he thought he knew. "For being there that night, for stopping instead of riding on, for pulling me from that fire and giving me a reason to live, for loving me and building this life with me. For everything, Nathan. Thank you for everything." Nathan kissed the top of her head, his heart full to bursting. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for seeing past a gruff cowboy and finding someone worth loving. Thank you for staying, for choosing this life with me. Thank you for being my wife and my partner and the love of my life." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, content and complete. And outside, the ranch settled into peaceful night, a testament to what could be built from love and determination, and two people who had found each other exactly when they needed to most. Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives must hold. Nathan and Laura lost friends to age and illness, and they felt the aches and pains that came with their own advancing years. But they faced it all together, just as they had faced everything else. Their love remained constant, a North Star guiding them through whatever challenges came their way. When Nathan was 68 years old, he suffered a mild heart episode that frightened them both. The doctor ordered him to slow down, to let Thomas and the ranch hands handle more of the physical work. Nathan chafed at the restrictions at first, unused to sitting idle. But Laura helped him find new ways to contribute, managing the business end of the ranch from his desk, and mentoring his grandchildren in the lessons he had learned over a lifetime. Laura herself remained healthy and active well into her 60s, though her eyes grew weaker, and her hands less steady for the fine sewing work she had once excelled at. But she still made quilts for each grandchild, still tended her garden, still filled the house with the warmth of her presence. And she still looked at Nathan with the same love and devotion she had shown from the beginning. On their 40th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a large party at the ranch, inviting neighbors and friends from all over the county. It was a joyous celebration, filled with music and dancing and heartfelt toasts to the couple who had built such a beautiful life together. Nathan and Laura sat in places of honor, watching the festivities with joy and pride. As the sun set on that celebration, Nathan stood and offered Laura his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Zeller?" Laura smiled and took his hand, letting him lead her to the cleared space where others were dancing. They moved slowly together, no longer having the energy for the quick steps of their youth, but with a grace that came from decades of moving through life in harmony. As they swayed to the music, surrounded by the people they loved most in the world, Nathan leaned down and whispered in Laura's ear, "I would do it all again, you know. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time." Laura looked up at him with tears in her eyes and love shining from her face. "And I would choose you. Always and forever, Nathan. You are my home, my heart, my everything." They continued to dance as the stars emerged overhead and the ranch settled into peaceful night around them. And in that moment, held in each other's arms with their family celebrating nearby, they were exactly where they were meant to be. Two souls who had found each other in fire and forged a love that would last until their final breaths and beyond, into the legacy they would leave behind in children and grandchildren, and the ranch that would bear the Zeller name for generations to come. The story of the cowboy who saved a woman from a burning wagon and told her she had him when she felt she had nothing had become family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. It was a story about love and courage and the power of being there for someone when they needed it most. It was a story about taking a moment of crisis and transforming it into a lifetime of happiness. And it was a story that would continue to inspire long after Nathan and Laura were gone. A reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can offer another person is simply yourself, fully and without reservation. As they grew older still, Nathan and Laura spent more time on their porch, watching the ranch operate around them and enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing memories and dreams and observations about their family. They held hands like young lovers, finding comfort and connection in that simple touch that had sustained them through 40-plus years of marriage. On a warm summer evening when Nathan was 73 and Laura was 70, they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The ranch was peaceful, the cattle grazing contentedly in the distance, the house behind them filled with the presence of Laura's latest quilting project and the photographs of family that covered every surface. "It has been a good life," Nathan said softly, his weathered hand clasped firmly around Laura's. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was a young man alone in this house." "The best life," Laura agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We were lucky, Nathan. So very lucky to have found each other." "Not lucky," Nathan corrected gently. "Blessed. We were blessed with that moment on the road, and we were wise enough to recognize it and build something beautiful from it." They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in shades of purple and gold. And as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nathan and Laura remained on their porch, together as they had been through everything, facing whatever came next with the same courage and love that had carried them through 4 decades of marriage. Their story was one of rescue and redemption, of finding love in unexpected places and nurturing it through the years. It was a story that proved that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best outcomes if we are open to possibility and willing to take chances on connection. And it was a story that ended not with drama or tragedy, but with the quiet contentment of 2 people who had loved deeply and well, who had built a life together that mattered, and who would face whatever came next secure in the knowledge that they had truly lived. The Zeller Ranch would continue on, passed down through generations who would tell the story of how it all began. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would grow up hearing about the night a cowboy saved a woman from a burning wagon, and how that moment of heroism and compassion had created a legacy of love that endured. And somewhere in those retellings, Nathan and Laura's spirits would live on, forever young and forever together, eternally grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and the choice they had made to build a life from the ashes. As the years wound on and they both grew frailer with age, Nathan and Laura never lost their devotion to each other. Thomas had fully taken over running the ranch, though he still consulted his father on major decisions. The grandchildren were growing up, some starting families of their own, creating the next generation of Zellers. The great-grandchildren brought new life and energy to family gatherings, climbing into Nathan and Laura's laps to hear stories about the old days. When Nathan was 77, he suffered a more serious heart episode that kept him bedridden for several weeks. Laura never left his side, sleeping in a chair beside the bed and tending to his every need. The doctor warned them that Nathan's time might be limited, that his heart was wearing out after a long and active life. But Nathan recovered enough to get back on his feet, determined to squeeze every possible moment out of the life he and Laura had built together. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by a crowd so large it filled the yard of the ranch. 5 decades of marriage, of partnership, of love. It seemed impossible that so much time had passed since that night on the road outside Eureka. Yet here they were, gray-haired and wrinkled and still completely devoted to each other. During the celebration, Thomas stood to make a toast, his own hair now showing threads of silver. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "They taught us what love really means. Not the easy, romantic love of youth, though they had that too, but the deep, abiding love that weathers storms and celebrates joys and never, ever gives up. They showed us that when you commit to someone, you commit fully, with your whole heart and soul. And they proved that true love does not fade with time but grows stronger and deeper and more beautiful with each passing year." He raised his glass, and the entire gathering followed suit. "To Nathan and Laura Zeller, may we all be as blessed as they have been, and may we love as truly and well as they have loved each other." The toast was met with cheers and applause, and Nathan looked at Laura with tears streaming down his weathered face. She was crying too, and they held each other as their family celebrated around them, grateful beyond measure for every moment they had been given together. 2 years later, on a quiet spring morning, Laura woke to find Nathan had passed peacefully in his sleep. His heart, which had beaten strong for 79 years and had loved her for over 50 of them, had simply stopped. She held his body and wept, feeling as though a part of her own soul had been torn away. But even through the devastating grief, she felt gratitude. Gratitude that he had not suffered, that he had lived a long and fulfilling life, that she had been blessed to be his wife for half a century. The funeral was held at the ranch, just as Nathan would have wanted. People came from all over the county to pay their respects to the man who had built such a legacy. Thomas spoke movingly about his father's integrity and work ethic. Grace talked about his gentleness and wisdom. William shared stories about learning to train horses under Nathan's patient guidance. And Margaret, by video message from San Francisco, where she now ran a successful engineering firm, spoke of how her grandfather had always encouraged her dreams even when they seemed impossible for a woman of her time. But it was Laura's words that brought everyone to tears. Standing beside Nathan's grave, her voice steady despite the tears on her face, she told the story one more time. The story of a burning wagon and a cowboy who stopped to help. The story of a woman who had lost everything and a man who had offered her himself. The story of love that had transformed both their lives and created a legacy that would endure. "He saved my life that night," Laura said, her eyes on the casket that held her beloved. "But more than that, he gave me a life worth living. He loved me without condition or reservation. He supported my dreams and partnered with me to build something beautiful. He gave me children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all carrying forward the values we tried to instill. And he never, not for a single day of our 52 years together, made me regret choosing this life with him." She paused, gathering her composure. Nathan Zeller was a good man, a kind man, a man of his word who lived with integrity and loved with his whole heart. And I was blessed beyond measure to be his wife. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life. But I will also carry him with me always in every memory, every story, every value he taught me. He may be gone from this world, but he will never be gone from my heart." As Nathan was laid to rest on a hill overlooking the ranch he had loved, Laura stood surrounded by her family, drawing strength from their presence while feeling the keen absence of her partner. The sun set over the land Nathan had worked all his life, painting the sky in the brilliant colors he had always loved, and Laura knew that somehow, somewhere, he was at peace. Laura lived for 3 more years after Nathan's death, staying in the ranch house surrounded by memories of their life together. She grew more frail as time passed, but her mind remained sharp and her spirit strong. She spent her days sitting on the porch where she and Nathan had passed so many evenings together, working on quilts for her expanding family and sharing stories with whoever came to visit. She talked often about Nathan, keeping his memory alive for the great-grandchildren who had been too young to really know him. She would tell them about his kindness and his strength, about how he had saved her from a fire and given her a reason to live, about how their love had built the ranch and family that surrounded them now. On a cool autumn evening, nearly 55 years after that fateful night on the road outside Irica, Laura passed away peacefully in her sleep, just as Nathan had. She was 82 years old and had lived a life fuller and richer than she had ever imagined possible as a young woman trapped in a burning wagon with nothing but despair. She was buried beside Nathan on the hill, their graves marked with matching headstones that bore their names, the dates of their births and deaths, and a simple inscription, "Together always." At the funeral, their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathered to celebrate her life and mourn her passing, but also to honor the love story that had created them all. Thomas, now in his 70s himself and preparing to pass the ranch to his own son, spoke about his mother's strength and creativity, her fierce independence and generous heart. He talked about how she had supported his father while also maintaining her own identity and dreams, showing her daughters and granddaughters that women could be both devoted wives and independent individuals. "My mother once told me," Thomas said, looking out at the gathered family, "that the night of the fire was the worst and best night of her life. The worst because she lost everything she had worked for, the best because it brought her to my father. And she said she would gladly lose everything material all over again if it meant finding that kind of love." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "That is the legacy my parents left us. Not just this ranch, though it is considerable, not just their possessions or their money or their land. Their real legacy is the example of their love. They showed us what it means to commit to another person completely, to weather life's storms together, to build something that lasts. And because of them, we all know what we are striving for in our own relationships. We all have a model of what love can be when it is nurtured and valued and protected." As Laura was laid to rest beside the man she had loved for over 50 years, her family stood together, linked by blood and the bonds of the love story that had created them all. The sun set over the Zeller ranch one more time, painting the sky in brilliant farewell, and somewhere beyond the visible world, Nathan and Laura were together again, reunited in whatever came after, forever bound by the love that had defined their lives. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations just as Nathan and Laura had hoped. Their great-grandchildren told the story to their own children, keeping alive the memory of the cowboy who had saved a woman from a burning wagon and offered her not just rescue but everything. The story became part of the family's identity, a reminder of where they came from and what values they were meant to uphold. In the ranch house, photographs of Nathan and Laura held places of honor. The cradle Nathan had built for Thomas was carefully preserved and used for each new baby born into the family. Laura's quilts covered beds throughout the house and were treasured as precious heirlooms. The creek where Nathan and Laura had confessed their love became a sacred spot, where young couples from the family would go to propose or renew their vows, carrying on the tradition. And on quiet evenings, When the family gathered on the porch of the ranch house, they would look out at the land Nathan had worked and Laura had loved, and they would tell the story again. The story of how everything began with a moment of crisis that became a moment of destiny. The story of a cowboy who stopped instead of riding on. The story of a woman who found strength in her darkest moment. The story of love that transformed two lives and created a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a story of rescue and redemption, of taking chances and keeping promises, of building something beautiful from the ashes of loss. It was a story that proved love could be found in the most unexpected places and could grow into something that changed not just two lives but countless others. It was a story with a happily ever after that extended far beyond the lifetimes of its original characters, living on in every marriage, every child, every moment of love and connection experienced by their descendants. The Zeller Ranch stood as a testament to what could be built when two people committed fully to each other and to the life they wanted to create. The land flourished under the care of each successive generation, always managed with the integrity and dedication Nathan had instilled. The family grew and prospered, carrying forward the values of honesty, hard work, and love that had been the foundation of Nathan and Laura's marriage. And though Nathan and Laura themselves had long since passed from the physical world, their presence remained. It was there in the sturdy construction of the house Nathan had maintained. It was there in the beautiful gardens Laura had planted. It was there in the stories told and retold, in the traditions maintained, in the love that continued to bind the family together across the generations. Theirs had been a love story for the ages, born from fire and forged in commitment, proven through decades of partnership and devotion. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes, that love can be found when you least expect it, and that sometimes the most important thing you can offer another person is simply yourself, fully and without reservation. Nathan Zeller had saved Laura Jensen from a burning wagon on a California road in 1878. But in truth, they had saved each other, giving one another purpose and partnership, and a love that lasted until their final breaths and beyond. And that love, that beautiful, enduring love, was the greatest legacy they could have left behind. It lived on in their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and all the generations yet to come. A light that would never be extinguished, a story that would never be forgotten, a love that would truly last forever.